So many of you guys have been asking me to do a bench press setup slash arch tutorial. So here is my full setup guide to the bench press. So first up, what you'll see is that I'm using a belt when benching. This is optional, this is not for everybody, especially if you have very short torso. This can actually reduce how much you'll be able to arch. So this might not be beneficial for you, but if it doesn't reduce your arch, it can give you some more tightness. To maximize how much you're getting out of the belt, I would recommend doing it really tight in the bench press. I have it so tight that I can only take it on while I'm laying down. Now, the very first thing I like to do when bench pressing is looking at my hand placement on the bar. There is two main things you want to look out for when choosing your bench press grip. First up is the width, and second is the angle of your wrist. Now, I have previously made a video specifically for the bench press grip, so if you're interested, go check that out. But what you want to have is a standardized grip width and a stacked wrist positioning. If you want to get really nerdy into stuff like this, then Steve Denovi has made a 50-minute long video specifically for this. However, we can't talk about the wrist positioning throughout this entire video. We need to look at a few more things before we get into the bench press itself though. And this is probably the most underrated and the most important thing for increasing your bench press, is utilizing your leg drive efficiently. Now, what you should be able to do with your feet is push your entire torso up and meet the bar with your rib cage through using your legs. You can see here when I'm doing a Larsen press style feet positioning, my chest is way lower than it is when I'm pushing with the feet to get the rib cage up. How exactly you should be pushing with your feet is just in the direction where you want to kind of push the floor away from you. You can see here I'm pushing so much that this mattress is actually sliding away from me. Now we have your grip and leg drive in place. Those are the two most important things about the setup. Now we need to actually do the bench press. But first up, we gotta unrack the bar. Now, what I will recommend for you guys that doing a self-out lift is to lift the butt off of the bench. And while you're doing that like this is also a great place for you to practice the extension of your back. You want to arch your back as much as possible when the butt is off the bench. Now, one thing that's super important about this is when you're letting the butt down on the bench, you don't want it to rest on the bench at all. The only points where we're actually resting on something is through the feet and your shoulders. You should feel your butt almost hovering over the bench throughout the entire lift at all times. Now, in competition, it needs to be actually in contact slightly with the bench, but it should only barely touch the bench. And now that we've covered that, we've basically gone through everything. Actually, the bench press itself is by far the easiest part in a technical point of view for the bench press. If you're doing everything in the setup perfectly, then you're gonna be completely fine in the lift itself. Now, there's one thing that's super important that you do while you're benching, and that is that you raise your chest to the bar using your upper back and using your legs to reach that bar with your chest. Now, the last thing that I want to cover real quick is just you don't want to brace against the belt the same way as you're doing in the squat and the deadlift. We don't want to maximize intra-abdominal pressure in a bench press because we want all of the air in our chest and get that up as high as possible.